Welcome everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you for joining me. If you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please help support my channel by clicking the subscribe button. And as an added bonus, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music. All right, we're going to take a look today at a brand new release by Dokken. It's an archival release collecting songs from 1978 to 81. It's called The Lost Songs. And there are various demos and things from that time period that have been fleshed out and embellished and or restored in order to be compiled on this release. And this came out on August 28th of 2020. But as a side note, Lynch Mob also put out a release on the same day. It's Wicked Sensation Reimagined. It's really good. I'll do a separate review of that. But if we can't have a Dokken album with both Don and George Lynch on it, at least we got two new releases by these guys on the same day, and can put them on shuffle and listen to it as though we're listening to a new Dokken, I guess. All right, but to review this album here and to understand it, I think we need to go into a little bit of history on it about where the songs come from and how they were generated for this release in terms of the archival quality of it. And so while the band Dokken itself formed in 1979, some of the material on here goes back to 1978. And Don Dokken being the namesake and primary songwriter and driving force of the band, he played with a number of different musicians and lineups early on. And in 1979, he recorded a 7-inch single was called Hard Rock Woman, or at least that was the A-side on it, but it also had a B-side, Broken Heart, and it used the musicians Stephen Barry on bass and Greg Packa on drums. And this was the first release to come out under the Dokken name. And the B-side to that, Broken Heart, actually appears on this archival release of Lost Songs. And Don Dokken then put together a new lineup in order to do a tour in Germany. And this lineup was Greg Leon on guitar. He would later go on to join Quiet Riot and replace Randy Rhoads in the band for a time being. And then Gary Holland on drums, who would later join Dante Fox, and Dante Fox would go on to become Great White. And then Gary Link on bass. And while on tour, Don met future up-and-coming producer Michael Wagner, who would feature in heavily to their career going forward, as well as a number of other hair bands from the 80s. And they worked on a demo together that would later resurface as the EP, Back in the Streets. The tracks on it was the title track, Back in the Streets, Felony, Day After Day, and We're Going Wrong. Those 4 tracks also all appear on this release, Lost Songs. And then in 1981, Don Dokken traveled back to Germany in order to attempt to secure a record deal, and using those previously recorded demos, he then signed with Kari Records. And the current lineup that entered the studio at that time to work with Michael Wagner again on their debut album at this point was, of course, Don Dokken on vocals and guitar. Now he's got George Lynch on guitar, Juan Croucier on bass, who would, of course, go on to later front Rat, and then Mick Brown on drums. And the album Breaking the Chains was initially released in 1981 under the name Don Dokken as a solo release. And it would take 2 more years before new management at the time, Cliff Bernstein of Metallica fame, would finally secure them an album deal in the US. And so they signed to Elektra Records, and then that 1981 album was remixed and partially re-recorded, and it would be re-released in 1983 as Breaking the Chains with this new mix and new sound. And of course, the band would go on to much bigger and greater success thereafter, but that's a separate story, and we're going to focus on this period, or the period that leads up to this, for this release here, Lost Songs 1978 to 81. And so, as I said, this album is an archival release collecting studio recordings from those 3 years, 78 to 81. And the liner notes inside it that are from Don Dokken states that the songs themselves are all ones that never made it onto a Dokken album, but that's not entirely true. Track number 5 on here, Felony, appears on the debut album Breaking the Chains that was released in both 1981 and 83. And track number 8, Hit and Run, this one here appears on an album called From Conception, live in 1981. And so it is a live album. It's not studio, and Lost Songs, you do get the studio version of it. But that album came out in 2007, so that track has been available for a while. And track number 10, Liar, which also appears on From Conception, live 1981. And so of all the songs that are on Lost Songs, this particular release, 3 of them have only are previously unreleased, at least as far as I can tell. Track number 1, Step Into the Light. This one he says he started in 1981 after the release of the Breaking the Chains album. But it took him nearly 40 years to finish it. And then tracks 4, which is Rainbows, and track 6, No Answer. And both of those are home recording demos that he did in his apartment nearly 40 years ago. And the recordings are really quite good quality. Don says that they've been cleaned up. Where it was needed, they either finished a song or fleshed it out. And to do that, he used his current band. So this is kind of a cool release in the sense that it spans what appears to be all the lineups, all the way going back to 1978, and the different members, all the way up to his current lineup of the band. But unfortunately, what that does is it creates varying sound qualities on this release. And so, some of the vocals are very clearly recorded in the 70s and 80s, but on first single, Step Into the Light, which is also one that he says he only just finished for the release of this album, the vocals sound like they are newly recorded. And since Don doesn't sound like he used to sound back in the late 70s and 80s, it makes for a very inconsistent sounding recording, hearing the different vocal styles. And then, of course, instrumentation, it kind of does the same thing, because whether it was a home recording or a studio recording, and to the degree of how good the studio was, that's going to create some varying sound quality as well. Now, all of it's been mastered at the same level, so it's all a consistent sound level. It doesn't go up and down in that regard. It's just that you can hear clearly when something is a demo versus something that was recorded at a higher quality, and or something that was done newer, more present, such as that first song, Step Into the Light. And as a personal preference on here, I think I would have preferred that the album either be untouched, and so that would have all remained essentially with the same sound quality and as an archival release, or he should have gone in and re-recorded the whole thing, bringing it up to the 21st century as an even consistent quality. And so, on top of that, there's also no album credits. There's nothing that says who plays on what. There's no band members listed in here. Now, perhaps that's for legal issues. He couldn't give certain people credits. Maybe that would have caused some issues. Who knows? But on here, we don't know who plays the guitars. We don't know if they're done by Don, by Greg Leon, George Lynch, or even his current guitar player, John Levin, who I think is a phenomenal guitar player, doing an excellent job holding down the fort. So let's take a look at this. This is the front cover. It's a really cool artwork, in my opinion, some of the best that they've done in a long time. Here's the back side of it, giving you the rundown of the tracks. And there it is if we open it up. Nothing happening on the inside here. And then we've got the booklet. Same thing on the cover itself. And then you've got those liner notes that are in here. And then kicking off, it's got the lyrics. And it does tell you who wrote the tracks, but again, it does not go into who played on them. We do get some cool archival shots there of some of the different guys on lineups, more lyrics, and then the back side of it there. And so bottom line on this release here, I think it's a fascinating release. It's really fantastic in my opinion. It's something that definitely, adds to the legacy of the band, and the material itself is worth checking out in my opinion. I recommend tracks on here number 1, number 4, number 6. Those are the ones that actually I think are probably the newer recorded and or ones that were touched up. They definitely come across that way on here. I hear a bit of what I think is John Levin on guitar on a couple of those. My only complaint though is that inconsistent quality that I mentioned on here. It clearly shows the different years that things were recorded, and it causes the album to not quite be as consistent as it could be. But outside of that, I do think it's a really interesting archival release that I think is a fun listen for both new and old Dokken fans. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, and I hope everyone has a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.